Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and Mike Cernovich. Thanks for tuning in. We'll give folks a few minutes to show up and so forth. It's been kind of a funny day today. Yeah, I thought I would wear it in tribute to all the alt retards who are going on and on about Cernovich and all this sort of thing. It was kind of funny. Anyhow, here's the thing. Someone once said, if I had the opportunity to either betray my country or betray my friend, I hope I would have the moral fortitude to betray my country. And there's a good reason for that. If you look at the proper priority for a man, what is the proper priority? What do they normally say? God, family, country. Where do friends fit in? I think that, especially with your good friends and that sort of thing, that they fit in between family and country. Right? And so, and your friends are not necessarily people that you agree with on everything. I don't agree with Milo about everything. I don't agree with Mike about everything. I don't agree with myself about everything from 5 years ago. Myself from 5 years ago, well, if you're active duty, it's your job. That's different. You've taken an oath. And so, but the important thing is, do you stick up for your friends or do you not? Do you stick up? If you can say my country right or wrong, then surely you can say, I'm going to stick by my friends. I tend to judge my friends by how much I can trust them. There are certain friends that I would trust with my children or my life. I might not trust them with my wife. There are other friends that I would trust with everything. There are other friends that I would trust. I might not trust them as far as certain things go, but if I had a body that I needed to bury in the middle of the night, I know I could go there and they would not even ask any questions. It was kind of funny. It was an interesting realization, in fact, because there was a friend of mine, and he was a friend who had kind of inserted himself in my life. He befriended my best friend and then just sort of, literally inserted himself on several occasions. We're going on spring break. We mentioned this, and then suddenly, he's gone too. I'm like, who invited him? And so, but I was kind of shocked when I realized, several years later, that if I had a body in the back of my trunk, he'd be the first guy I'd go to. Not only that, but he would be deeply touched and honored that I had brought the body to him. that he was the one that I'd asked for help. You know, I've got, it says Cernovich across the bottom. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, this is a good friend of mine, because I realized, you know, my best friend, he would absolutely help me do that, but he would be giving me a lecture the entire time. And another good friend of mine who could have done many, many things, I would have trust with many, many things. He would be unable to do it. And so, you know, that's how you realize, you know, who your true friends are. And another way that you realize who your true friends are is who sticks by you when you come under fire. You know, people don't realize this. But, you know, some of us who are, whatever you want to call them, semi-public figures, e-celebs, minor media, you know, petty media figures, whatever. I don't know how you want to describe it. E-infamous, e-notorious, whatever. But the point is, however you want to describe us, you know, we are real people. We have excuse me. We have relationships with each other. Some of them are positive. Some of them are negative. Even if we've never met in person, we still have communication and relationships that you guys don't necessarily see. So, you know, you might not understand why I trust Milo so much. You know, I have seen Milo put himself out on my behalf at some minor cost to himself when he didn't have to. You know, Cernovich, as I've said before, has given me some of the best advice, best, most useful, and productive advice that I've ever received. All right. And so, actually I have I've told this before, but it's kind of a funny Milo story. It probably won't surprise you that we have some private lines of communication between us, you know, just all these guys. And so one of mine happens to be on one of mine with Milo happens to be one on on the iPad. Now, I don't use the iPad much. I use it for this. That's about it. I only have it because I needed it for a game that was in development to test it. And so, anyhow, at some point, my daughter had borrowed it because there's one friend of hers that she needs to communicate with using it. And somehow, I don't know how, but there was a bit of communication between the child who kept inadvertently texting Milo. And so I'm getting these messages back from Milo saying, "What, Vox? What is this?" You know, because obviously the text messages did not make any sense to him, so he's trying to figure out what's going on. So I tell Space Bunny about this, and of course she's like, "Okay, I think this is an epic parenting fail." So, you know, here you've got the most notorious, flamboyant, libertine, hedonist, dangerous faggot in the world, and your children are texting him directly, whatever. So, anyhow, so that was pretty funny. So, so, no, but the thing is that actually, you know, Milo is somebody that I would trust I wouldn't have any problem with trusting Milo with my family. He has a, I understand probably more than most, the temptations of the hedonistic lifestyle that he's lived. He does have a good heart. He also has a conscience. He has considerably, he is actually a genuinely religious person, whether you realize it or not. So, and the thing is that, people like that, they're not necessarily going to wear their struggles on their sleeves. They're not necessarily going to demonstrate that for your entertainment. And so, I'm not attempting to justify or excuse or rationalize anything. All I'm saying is that, my house is far too glassy to be hurling any stones in those sorts of regards. And so, but the thing is, a lot of this stuff may well be true of some of the bad guys too. It may well be true of the Andrew Anglins, the Richard Spencers, whoever. Yes, Milo is gay. This is not news. This does not faze me. I don't know if a lot of you realize, but I used to be in a 90s techno band on a gay record label. Okay? So, I'm not saying that it's right. It isn't. I'm not saying that it's good. It's not. But it's not the only sin in the world. Yes, Wax Trax was extremely gay. Jim and Danny, the two founders of it, were actually together, which was actually kind of funny, because we actually drove by a gay nightclub once, and the limo ride. we're in two different limos. Fortunately, the drummer and I were in with the straight vice president, not the two gay owners, and our drummer said something about, look at all those faggots out there. Because there's a whole bunch of them in the street outside. And the president kind of coughed a little and said, well, Jim and Danny are partners. And our drummer was very young, and he wasn't particularly quick on the uptake. He says, business partners? No, not business. Well, yes, they were business partners, but that wasn't the point. So anyhow, it was pretty funny. But let's get to the topic. The topic is free speech. And what's been kind of funny is a lot of people, not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, a few people were expressing disappointment about my attitude towards free speech. Some other of the Anglins had noticed that I had said something about being for free speech when Milo had been kicked off of Berkeley or whatever. And then they heard me saying that I don't support free speech. And so they were doing the, aha! You're so stupid. You don't know what you think. Now, the thing that's funny about this, is that, people who, there are people who are capable of abstract thought, and then there's people who aren't. But then there's also an even more limited sort, which I call binary thinkers. Everything is, 1 or 0. Must be one or the other. The reality is this is very, very seldom true. Now, when, what I've said, I'm going to go in the abstract mode. If you're talking about the highest level abstract mode, there is no such thing as free speech. Free speech does not exist. All right? There is always a veto of your speech. Whether that veto is legal and political, imposed by the government, whether it is imposed by your social circle, whether it is imposed by your faith, all of these things take away from your free speech. Your speech is not truly free. Your speech is not free in the same way that your thoughts are free. Die Gedanken sind frei. I think that was Martin Luther that said that. The thoughts are free. Speech is not, because speech always interacts with the world. And so when you are, the moment that you speak in another's hearing, that limits you. There is a reason why you don't necessarily, even if you're with your wife, even if you're with your best friend, the mere fact of their presence limits your speech in reality. That is the material reality. So at the highest, most conceptual level, there's no such thing as free speech. It's the same as equality. It doesn't exist. So that is the first type of... So the type of free speech that we're talking about is Platonic. It is the Platonic ideal of free speech. Which means, of course, it does not exist in this real sub-Platonic, sub-ideal, non-optimal world. The second type of free speech is public free speech. Now, in certain countries, like the United States, free speech is constitutionally protected. That is not true where I live. That's not true in most of the countries in Europe. That's certainly not true in the Middle East. It's not true in Asia. So the idea that public free speech is some sort of given, that too is totally conditional. You cannot deny the Holocaust in Germany. You cannot blaspheme against Allah in the Middle East. Exactly, it's not true in most places. Even in the United States, free speech does not mean that you can threaten to rape someone, that you can tell someone that you're going to tell somebody else something unless they give you money. All right? So do you understand that even constitutionally protected free speech does not come anywhere near the Platonic free speech ideal? Actually, the interesting thing is that the whole fire in a movie theater thing is false. That was an example that was brought up. It's not true. People bring that up a lot, but it's not actually any sort of legal standard. And so, I don't know. I'd have to look into why people think that it is, but it's a legal myth. I think if you use the extortion example, that's much more relevant. Yeah, it's just an expression. So anyhow, and then, but see, this is wrong. Somebody said once websites start deleting speech for reasons other than illegal content, that's totally false. Most websites delete content for other reasons. And so, private free speech is what we're talking about with regards to Gab, with what we're talking about with regards to Google. and all these other things that are being debated. And there is absolutely no free speech whatsoever. I make this very, very clear at my blog, and I have since 2003. It says right there, basically, don't piss me off, don't piss Space Bunny off, don't be a jackass. Any of those things will result in your comments being deleted, and repeated examples of it will lead to you being banned entirely. Gab has a perfect right to ban Andrew Anglin. They have a perfect right to ban anyone else. All right? It isn't any different than Twitter legally, but, and this is something that people need to understand. A lot of you are very naive about things like contracts. Contracts are not magic. They're just words on paper. They are only as good as the people behind them. So, yes, Gab said that they're into free speech. So did Twitter at one point in time. Now, the difference is that Gab tends to do a very minimal policing. And they have a different set of norms and values. That's exactly correct. And so the issue, and this actually gets to what we're doing at Infogalactic. At Infogalactic, we're setting it up so that people can make that decision themselves. And so, now there is a real issue to be discussed. The real issue that does merit being discussed is when you've got a duopoly like Apple and Google, you can make a real case for those platforms being moved from the private level to, or from the private level to the public level. There is a real case for that. I think there's a fairly strong case for that. But that's not the case now. All right? Now, this is a separate, there's another issue when we talk about the registrars and all that sort of thing. I believe that the registrars, even though they are private companies, because of the way that they are set up by the government, they are essentially a public utility. And that they should be handling things on a content-neutral basis. Personally, I think it is wiser to use... Exactly. The Postal Service cannot refuse to deliver anti-Semitic pamphlets. The Postal Service is not permitted to open up all your envelopes and make sure that there's nothing there. The government already regulates the internet. The government created the internet. So you can't. You've got no reason. That's an irrelevant point. If you want to build your own private internet, go ahead. So the registrars are. I'm not making them salivate. You're ignorant. Don't say stupid things like that. Do you even know what ARPANET is? You probably don't know what ARPANET is. Since you don't talk about this. You don't have the necessary information. The internet was set up and created by the government. So don't worry about the government controlling it. It has all along. I think the dark web is a bit of both. It's basically the part of the internet that operates outside of the ICANN structure. Now, we're talking about... okay, well, if I misinterpreted it, fine. Sorry, don't worry about it. The dark web is a hybrid. And there's a lot of ways to work around the ICANN system. And people do. And actually, at Infogalactic, we have we have some plans for an app that will make stuff easier for people to navigate that in the event that ICANN goes crazy And we've been thinking about this stuff for years and planning for this possibility for years. So, the whole idea that, we must stand by Andrew Anglin because if we don't, they will take over the whole. It's just ridiculous. It's going to happen at some point in time. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen at some point in time. Personally, I don't think it is going to happen the way that people think it is. I think what's much more likely to happen is that you're going to start seeing the internet fragment on a national basis. That's already happened. China has its own internet, its own applications. Turkey has its own internet and is developing its own applications. This is why Facebook and all these folks are so concerned about what they call the Great Wall of China. And so, anyhow, but that's what I'm saying. The entire web is not going to converge. The entire web is going to fragment. And that's going to be its own separate set of huge problems and huge opportunities. But, it's just something that we have to deal with. Basically, the whole internet is going to be more like China. Except for the rules are going to be different in each different place. And so, and so the U.S. internet is already ready to do that. At InfoGalactic, we're already setting it up so that people can have it their way. No, I think Obama wanted to pass it off just because he's a globalist, and they always want to kick power upstairs. The UN is not subject to the limitations of the US. So, but yeah, the thing is, so anyhow, those are the three types. Let's recapitulate. Those are the three types of free speech: platonic, public, and private. Now, this indicates what a nasty little creep Andrew Anglin is. I actually I was one of the few people who came out and publicly defended his right to public free speech. I think that was being violated by the way he was being treated with the domain registry and with the registrars. It was wrong. On the other hand, I think that if I were Andrew Torba, I would have kicked him and a lot of his little fans off as well, because they're going to be, they are a negative. Women who saw the way that Space Bunny was being treated don't want anything to do with Gab. Why would you want to be in a place where you're potentially going to be subjected to that? So, what woman, what married woman wants a bunch of weird 20-something creeps telling her that they want her to lick his bunghole and accusing her of adultery and all that sort of thing. Going on and about how you like to fuck other men and this sort of thing, right? I don't permit that kind of behavior on Vox Populi. That's one reason why it's a popular site. I can tell you right now, Gab is going to end up cracking down on that stuff because Andrew's got a fiance, and it's going to happen to her at some point in time, and at that point in time, Gab is going to have to come in and crack down. Now, obviously, Space Bunny's not fazed. She's been hassled by creeps her entire life because she's very pretty. So she's perfectly capable of putting those kind of losers in their place. But here's the point. Most women don't want to deal with that kind of crap. And so, that's a choice that each site has to make. And so, as far as some of you asked about the debate, apparently Andrew Anglin has rescheduled, or I should say he has rescheduled, and apparently the debate is going to be on Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Tara McCarthy is hosting it. I'll go ahead and prepare for it. I won't be the slightest bit surprised if he runs away again. So we'll see. But if I'll just tell you one thing, if you're expecting, actually, to be honest, I'd actually heard from somebody who is in his camp that they had been some of the stuff that they had been sending him to prepare. And it kind of made me laugh because I realized how wildly unprepared for it he is. So, but here's the thing. Right from their style guide, right from their strategy guide, they say that they claim victory under all conditions. And so, you've already seen that. After we were supposed to have the debate tonight. After he ran away, several of his little fans were saying, "Oh, it's so sad that you ran away from him." These are just profoundly dishonest little creeps. And so, but we know this. We know they do that. It's not a problem. We're used to dealing with SJWs. I literally wrote the book called SJWs Always Lie. So I can handle a few of these fake right guys lying about stuff. They lie about who they are, they lie about what they do, they lie about everything. And so, because the thing is, the thing that they will never understand is that these are not people who read Aristotle. These are not people who understand this. And so they don't understand that the truth is the source of the most powerful rhetoric. I don't know who Dennis Wise is, so I have absolutely no opinion. Please don't ask the same question twice. If I ignore something, it's usually for a reason. So I don't know who it is. I don't care. I have no opinion. So anyhow, if you look at, what was I going to say? I'm talking about Aristotle, rhetoric. Anyhow, Aristotle is not on par with Nietzsche. Aristotle is probably the greatest human intellect, other than possibly Isaac Newton, in human history. Comparing Aristotle to Andrew Anglin. Oh, that's funny. Jesus had a bit of an advantage being God and all. I don't think that's quite fair. No, Aristotle is well ahead of Plato. So, but yeah, they don't understand philosophy versus ideology. They don't understand the importance of philosophy. It was kind of funny because somebody said that one of the fake right guys was saying, "Oh, that was the question. I just remember now. Did Isaac Newton write any books?" Yeah, I've got. Right here. He wrote a pretty big one. It's called Principia. The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. And I have to admit, I have not read this cover to cover. I have only read a few chapters, and it made my head hurt. So, but it's always good to have these things. Not one of my personal favorites, but I do recommend it if you are mathematically minded. I personally find this much more useful. You can see it's all worn off. This is a copy of Aristotle's Rhetoric and the Poetics. And so, highly recommended, very highly recommended. My chapter 10 in SJWs Always Lie is basically a entire chapter devoted to a single paragraph of Aristotle's Rhetoric. It's actually kind of funny too, because somebody was saying something about me being sophistic, or being sophistry, and I kind of laughed because I knew he had no idea what he was talking about, and I said, "What are you? What kind of sophistry do you mean? Are you talking about ambiguity? Are you talking about amphiboly? All the actual different types of sophistry, as delineated by Aristotle." Of course, he had no idea what I was talking about. That was amusing. So anyhow, somebody said, why is it important to discuss National Socialism? And that's a great question. And there's a very important reason, is because it allows us to establish that the Andrew Anglins and the Richard Spencers and all the various Nazi LARPers are not part of the alt-right. They are not part of the right at all. And so that's why I call them fake right. And that's why the fake right label stings them so much. And that's why they get so upset about it, is because they know that they're not of the right. If you look at what they stand for, whether you look at the National Socialists, whether you look at Richard Spencer, whether you look at Andrew Anglin and his crowd, there is very, very little that is right-wing about them. And so it doesn't matter if you have to understand that ideology is all-encompassing. So you look at everything. You don't just say, I mean, seriously, what is somebody going to claim? Oh, well, we hate the Jews, so we're extreme right. Really? So, Nasser, a secular Marxist Arab socialist who repeatedly went to war against Israel, he's extreme right? Of course not. Yeah, I've noticed that they're trying to say that the alt-right aren't right-wing because of civic nationalism. Like I said, they also deserve the label alt-retard. Because civic nationalism is it's partially of the right. It's definitely not of the left. It's not as right-wing as pure nationalism, but it's certainly okay. But you said before, we're leaving the world of ideology and entering the world of identity politics. We are. And that's a transformation that has already taken decades and is going to take decades more before it's complete. You've got to get your head out of this binary either-or, 1-0, black-white. The world does not work like that. Yes, identity politics have come. They are now part of the situation. But obviously, it is not completely identity. It's a mix. It's right now is part of the transfer. I mean, the transformation from ideology politics to identity politics began in the 60s. it's still taking place. It's farther along. Yeah, and just, you know, here's the interesting thing. Who do you think the socialists voted for in the last German presidential election? Okay? There's three parties. The National Socialist Party, the Center Party, and the Communist Party. No, I'm talking about in 1933. Who do you think the SPD is called the SPD, the Socialist Party? Who did they vote for? Did they vote for the Communists? Did they vote for the Catholic Center? Or did they vote for the National Socialists and Hitler? See, what's interesting is that none of you answered correctly. The communists ran a guy named Thalmann. The socialists normally would have been more interested in voting for Hitler, but they wanted, or for the National Socialists and the National Socialist program, but they voted for Hindenburg and the Catholic Center because they wanted to keep Hitler out. And they did so successfully. And so the communists only got 10% of the vote. Thalmann only got 10% of the vote. Hitler got about 30-some percent. And Hindenburg got over 50% and won. So to say that, oh, X was opposed to Y, it is not indicative of anything. No, the Social Democrats did not have control at that point. Here's another interesting question. There were 8 political parties active in that got a decent amount of parliamentary votes in 1932. Okay? Tell me which one of these parties was the primary target of the National Socialists in 1932. Communists, Socialists, Center, Bavarian People's Party, German People's Party, or the Nationalist Party. Which of those do you think was the primary target of the Nazis, the main one that they campaigned against? Socialist, Communist, Center. Yeah, they ran hardest against the Nationalists. That was their main target. Because they viewed the Nationalists as a potential threat. Okay? So, are you going to tell me that the National Socialists are internationalists because they hated the Nationalists? I mean, think about it. The Nazis were not proper nationalists. They were German imperialists. So all of this stuff is considerably more complicated than the binary thinkers would have you understand it. And when you get these, these shorthand versions at university, or that you pick up from some author somewhere, no, pan-nationalism is not nationalism. That's the thing. And so, so yeah, exactly. You can't argue that Catholics aren't Christians because Catholics and Protestants fight. All right? So, anyhow, so that's what I've got. So, so now you understand why I say either I support free speech, or I oppose free speech, or I don't believe free speech exists. Because we're talking about the 3 different types of free speech. If you want to see where I got some of that information from, This is a good source, Tragedy and Hope, Carol Quigley. You can see I took a lot of notes for a book a while back. So anyhow, so that's it for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the Cernabit shirt, you can find them at crypto.fashion. And have a good evening.